All right. We are reviewing Divergent Mind Thriving in a World That Wasn't Designed for You by Janera Narenberg. From her author bio, Janera is a journalist, producer, speaker, and founder of the Neurodiversity Project, hosting best selling authors in the arts and sciences who push for innovation and research in media. Based in San Francisco, Janera is a native who returned to the area after 6 years of international reporting from Asia and interdisciplinary graduate training from Harvard School of Public Health, Harvard Kennedy School of Government, MIT Sloan School of Management, and Harvard Business School. One reviewer called it a paradigm shifting study of neurodivergent women, those with ADHD, autism, synesthesia, high sensitivity, and sensory process disorder, exploring why these traits are overlooked in women and how society benefits from allowing their unique strengths to flourish, which I found to be a pretty good summation of the author's intent. As a successful Harvard and Berkeley educated writer, entrepreneur, and devoted mother, Janera Narenberg was shocked to discover that her symptoms, only ever labeled as anxiety, were considered autistic and ADHD. Being a journalist, she dove into the research and uncovered neurodiversity, a framework that moves away from pathologizing abnormal versus normal brains and instead recognizes the vast diversity of our mental makeups. When it comes to women, sensory processing differences are often overlooked, masked, or mistaken for something else entirely. Between a flawed system that focuses on diagnosing younger male populations and the fact that girls are conditioned from a young age to blend in and conform to gender expectations, women often don't learn about their neurological differences until they are adults, if at all. As a result, potentially millions live with undiagnosed or misdiagnosed neurodivergencies, and the misidentification leads to depression, anxiety, low self esteem, and shame. Meanwhile, we all miss out on the gifts their neurodivergent minds have to offer. Divergent Mind is a long overdue, much needed answer for women who have a deep sense that they are different. Sharing real stories from women with high sensitivity, ADHD, autism, misophonia, dyslexia, SPD, and more, Nirenberg explores how these brain variances present differently in women and dispels widely held misconceptions. For example, it's not that autistic people lack sensitivity and empathy, but they have an overwhelming excess of it. Nirenberg also offers us a path forward, describing practical changes in how we communicate, how we design our surroundings, and how we can better support divergent minds. When we allow our wide variety of brain makeups to flourish, we can create a better tomorrow for us all. When Nirenberg began her research, she found that the National Institute of Health Studies on Gender Bias in Medical Research, which found that adult women were being overlooked for ADHD and autism. She discusses the difficulty of getting diagnosed as a woman due to the initial perception that ADHD and autism mainly affect boys and men. She discusses the concept of masking. Masking is making an effort to hide behaviors in order to fit in. She asserts that girls and women with ADHD and autism are frequently overlooked because they are socialized to be accommodating, which can become more intense with masking. The author then goes through a history of mental health care, beginning with a discussion of witch hunts, the diagnosis of hysteria, and the general lack of humanity that neurodivergent women have been historically treated with. She discusses how women's mental health was considered a gynecological issue. Male doctors did not believe women about their experiences. She covers the history of Sigmund Freud, whose initial therapeutic theories were that he was seeing an incredible amount of childhood sexual abuse in women. And then the fathers who were paying for that therapy did not like that, so he came up with his latter theories. Um, Nirenberger details the history of the medicalization of well-being. Psychology was new and still being proved, and in order to measure up to harder sciences, they sought physical treatments, and social experiences became a lesser concern. In the 1950s, sterilization became common for women because they didn't want them to pass any of their mental illnesses down to their children. Marriage was also illegal for a time for the same purpose. She then goes into the history and fallibility of the DSM. She states that normal responses to trauma were pathologized to make their treatment seem more prestigious and scientific. The history timeline ends in the 80s when ADHD began to be discussed. So that's the first part of the book. In the second part of the book, she addresses how neurodivergent women are driving change. She discusses the creation and work of a woman-led STAR Institute in Colorado. She reports on one-on-one interviews with researchers and therapists there. They focus on occupational therapy for treating sensory issues. Occupational therapy, OT, is a branch of healthcare that helps people of all ages who have physical, sensory, or cognitive problems. OT can help them regain independence in all areas of their lives. Here she takes a deep dive into SPD, or sensory processing disorder. Sensory integration therapies used at the STAR normally involve specific sensory activities that include swinging, bouncing, spinning, dry brushing, and compression to help the individual to regulate their sensory response. Nirenberg praises the recent, in 2016, creation of STAR as a step in the right direction. The third and final section takes the information given in the first two parts and applies them to everyday life. The author discusses ways to make adjustments to daily routines. She discusses at length the psychological link between environment and well-being and suggests ways to make your home align with your sensory needs to create a safe space. She also discusses the specific difficulties that sensory sensitivities can have an impact on child rearing, especially sensitivity to touch, sound, and disruption of routines. She spends the most of the third part discussing neurodivergent women at work. They think and process differently, and so they work differently. While they can still get things done, their needs go against the grain of most workplace cultures. Firings are frequent. Nirenberg focuses again on reframing. She encourages women to show their needs and habits and communicate with managers about work plans and resources. She covers the experience of one woman who created an employee resource group for neurodiversity. Build on your own strengths to adapt. If unique gifts are facilitated, they can thrive instead of masking and having needs unmet, causing them to become depressed and anxious. Another unique approach to the subject suggested by Nirenberg is the idea of using tech in the future to account for biases. AI, virtual reality, augmented reality are interesting avenues for neurodivergent people. I wish she had gone farther into detail on this because the way she described it, there are people out there thinking that it has a lot of potential to help. But at the same time, a lot of people are criticizing these same technologies for reinforcing bias. So I would love to hear more about that. She discusses the current use of chatbots programmed to help people on the patterns of neurodivergence as a starting point in the present. The author presents an interesting combination of history surrounding the female experience of neurodivergence and discusses a lot of interesting new therapies and coping mechanisms. The author interviews many specialists at the forefront of the field, and hearing their takes brings weight to the book. It does a wonderful job of explaining various neurological disorders through the lens of sensitivities and establishes a great foundation for neurodiverse framework. In general, the information covers more breadth than depth, making it a better option for people who are looking into this topic for the first time. One big flaw that I found in the book is that it is only really geared towards people or women who are being diagnosed in late lives, whether already mid-career, they've gone through school, and that's a very specific population, and that's not really suggested at the beginning of the book. It's just something that you notice over time that it's really just for this one population. It doesn't really discuss anything about neurodivergent experiences of women of color or of different classes, so that's something I would really like to see covered. I think that her focus on independent and upper class women should have been defined in the title or description, as many who approach this book will not be able to relate to the author's experiences. However, I did take food for thought from this book and the possibilities of reframing the workplace norms in subtle ways that can help neurodivergent women.